She said the back row suits you better. Easier to slip out if you get tired. And just like that, my own son, Daniel, shuffled me out of my grandson's graduation like I was some worn-out relic. But the second betrayal cut deeper. While I sat in the shadows, they told everyone they built Ethan's success, funded every step, stole the credit I bled decades for. And Ethan, he kept searching the crowd, never seeing me. That's when the dean took the mic and opened a sealed folder. My name was inside. So was the truth. What they didn't know. Margaret left me one last move. My name is Harold Bennett, and I'm 75 years old. Every morning, I sit at my kitchen table in the house I built with my own hands, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise through windows. I've kept spotless since Margaret passed. My grandson Ethan, who inherited my knack for fixing things, spends weekends with me in the garage learning basic repairs, while my children Daniel and Linda only show up when they need something signed or borrowed. The familiar scent of machine oil still clings to my workbench, where Margaret's photos line the mantel, each smile a reminder of better days. There's comfort in knowing she left me that sealed envelope in the safe, her final gift that no one else knows about. But let me start from the beginning. I pulled into the crowded university parking lot, following the stream of well-dressed families heading toward the auditorium. My old Buick stuck out among the shiny SUVs and luxury sedans, but I'd kept that engine purring like new for 15 years. You know how it is with machines. Treat them right, they stay loyal. The late May heat hit me as I stepped out, making my starched collar already feel too tight. Margaret would have ironed this suit better, but I'd done my best that morning, pressing each crease like she taught me. Funny how some memories stick with you, her standing at the ironing board, humming while steam rose around her hands. Through the glass doors, I could hear brass instruments warming up, their notes bouncing off the high ceiling. Royal blue and gold banners rustled overhead, and rows of folding chairs stretched toward a stage decked out in school colors. Parents were already claiming their spots, program booklets fanning faces in the stuffy air. That's when I spotted Daniel and Karen near the front, their heads turning my way with those practiced smiles that never quite reached their eyes. Daniel raised his hand in a half-wave that seemed more like shooing a fly. I made my way over, dodging elbows and purses, trying to keep my dignity intact. "Dad, we saved you a seat," Daniel said, but his hand gestured toward the very back row. Karen's pearl necklace caught the light as she nodded, all teeth and condescension. "The back row suits you better," she explained, voice dripping honey-sweet poison. "You know, easier to slip out if you get tired." She pressed a program into my palm like she was handling something slightly distasteful. I wanted to remind them I'd worked 12-hour shifts in a machine shop for 30 years. I could handle sitting through one graduation ceremony. But I swallowed those words down. They settled hard in my gut right next to breakfast. From my assigned spot in the shadows, I watched Ethan file in with the other graduates. His eyes kept scanning the front rows, bright with excitement, searching faces. My chest tightened when his gaze passed right over my corner without finding me. Some grandfather I was, hidden away like old furniture nobody wanted to look at anymore. Camera flashes popped up front where the important people sat. A woman in an expensive suit bragged about her daughter's fellowship. A man in golf clothes mentioned his son's job offers. I gripped my armrest until my knuckles ached, forcing myself to stay put. This was Ethan's day. I wouldn't spoil it by making a scene. You ever notice how shame feels physical? Like a weight pressing down on your shoulders, making it hard to sit straight? That's how it felt, watching other grandparents up front, hugging their graduates, taking photos, belonging. The usher started dimming the house lights, and a hush fell over the crowd. Gowns rustled as students shifted in their seats. The dean approached the podium, his bow tie precise against his crisp shirt. In his hands he held a sealed folder that caught my attention, something about the way he carried it, like it held more than just another speech. He adjusted the microphone, cleared his throat. "Before we begin today's ceremony, we have a special announcement." The auditorium went dead quiet. You could have heard a pin drop on that carpet. I found myself holding my breath along with everyone else, though I couldn't have told you why. Sometimes you can feel when something big is coming, like the pressure drop before a storm. I glanced at Daniel and Karen's backs, ramrods straight in, their front row seats. They looked so sure of themselves, so certain of their place in the world. The dean opened his folder with careful fingers, and I waited, stomach clenched for whatever was coming next. You know that moment when your whole world tilts on its axis, when everything you thought was solid ground suddenly shifts under your feet? That's what happened next. Dean Whitaker adjusted his glasses, beaming at the crowd like he had Christmas morning secrets to share. "Welcome, families and friends," he began, his voice warm and practiced. "Before we proceed with the conferring of degrees, I want to highlight an honor that, well, that changes what you thought you knew about this graduating class." The projector hummed to life behind him, and my heart nearly stopped when Ethan's name appeared in crisp letters against the white screen. Below it was a title that made my throat tight: "The Man Who Built Me." For a second there, warmth spread through my chest like that first sip of coffee on a winter morning, the kind of feeling I used to get watching Ethan learn to use my old micrometer in the garage, his small hands steady just like mine. But then Daniel's breath was hot against my ear, his whisper sharp as a file's edge. "Don't get sentimental, Dad. Ethan's success is ours. We made this happen." I might have been stuck in the back row, but I could still hear Karen's voice carrying to the folks in front of her, sweet as antifreeze. "We funded every step," she was saying, loud enough to make sure everyone heard. "Every tutorial, every prep course." Phone cameras tilted her way, catching what I'm sure was her practiced proud parent smile. That old familiar taste crept into my mouth. Copper, like the days I'd mess up a precision cut in the shop. Failure. Humiliation. My fingers slid from the armrest to my cane. Maybe if I left now, while the lights were still dim. "Now," Dean Whitaker continued, completely unaware of the knife twisting in my gut, "I'd like everyone to hear an excerpt from this remarkable piece in the author's own words." A young woman in graduation robes, must have been one of the honor students, stepped up to the podium. She adjusted the microphone, shuffled her papers, cleared her throat. The room went quiet as a closed workshop on Sunday. Then she started reading, and the first words froze me mid-rise. "My grandfather Harold." My hands gripped the cane tighter, arms trembling just a bit. Up front, I could see Daniel's shoulders go stiff as steel. Karen's head snapped around so fast her pearls clicked together. And me, I sank back into my seat, barely breathing, waiting to hear what my grandson had written. About the old man they'd tried so hard to hide in the shadows. "You know what it's like when time seems to stop? When every second stretches out like hot metal on the forge?" That's how it felt, sitting there in that too-warm auditorium, waiting for the next words to fall. Everything I'd taught Ethan, every quiet moment in the garage, every lesson about precision and patience, it all hung in the balance of what came next. The honor student took a breath, and I found myself doing the same, both of us poised on the edge of something that felt bigger than just a graduation speech. The paper crinkled softly in her hands as she continued reading. The honor student's voice carried through the auditorium, clear as a bell on Sunday morning. Every Saturday, without fail, my grandfather Harold would wave me into his garage workshop. The smell of motor oil and metal shavings meant another lesson was about to begin. My throat tightened. I remembered those mornings like they were yesterday. Ethan's small hands learning to grip tools properly, his eyes bright under the fluorescent lights. "When I was 12, she read, "our Buick's transmission went out. Instead of calling a shop, Grandfather Harold laid out his tools like surgical instruments and said, 'Watch carefully. This is how we solve problems.'" I could still picture Ethan's face, streaked with grease, peering up from under that old car. We spent 3 weekends on that transmission, and every minute was a lesson in patience. He taught me that torque isn't just about strength. It's about respect for the machine. "Too tight crushes truth," he'd say. "Too loose lets it slip away." These weren't just repair lessons. They were life lessons. The words kept coming, each one carving deeper into the air. Stories of failed attempts and patient corrections, of precision measurements and careful adjustments. Tales of a grandfather who showed that mistakes weren't failures if you learned from them. My grandfather Harold. The phrase rang out again and again, like a hammer striking true. There was no mistaking who had shaped this young man's character, no room for alternative interpretation, no way to steal this truth. Heads started turning in the crowd. I caught glimpses of relatives twisting in their seats, searching for me in the shadows. My cousin Martha slowly lowered her phone, her recording forgotten as she stared at Daniel and Karen. Daniel's jaw worked back and forth like a stuck piston. Karen's picture-perfect smile cracked at the edges. her lipstick suddenly too bright against her pale face. The facade they'd built was crumbling, brick by carefully laid brick. When the reading finished, applause broke out, sharp and sudden like summer rain on my old tin workshop roof. The sound carried whispers with it, spreading through the rows like ripples in still water. The grandfather, not the parents. All this time we thought, did you hear what they claimed earlier? A deep red flush crawled up Daniel's collar, the same way it used to when I'd catch him in a lie as a boy. Karen's knuckles went white around her program. Dean Whitaker stepped back to the podium, holding up the folder like a prize. This remarkable essay will be permanently archived in our university library, he announced, along with documentation of the scholarship it earned. Future generations will read about the impact of quiet mentorship and dedicated teaching. Something warm bloomed in my chest. Not pride exactly, but vindication. Pure and simple truth, impossible to deny. Every hour in that garage, every patient explanation, every shared moment of triumph over a stubborn machine, it was all preserved now, carved in stone where they couldn't touch it. But I felt the pressure building beside me, like a gauge climbing into the red. Daniel leaned close, his whisper sharp as broken glass. "Enjoy your minute, Dad," he hissed. "The house decides who matters. Remember who controls the property now." The warmth in my chest flickered, like a flame in wind. He was right about one thing. The house, the one I'd built with my own hands, the one that held every memory of Margaret and our life together, that was still their ace in the hole, or so they thought. The house lights dimmed for the next segment of the ceremony. In the darkness, I could feel Daniel's satisfaction rolling off him in waves. He thought he'd won the war with that threat, even if he'd lost this battle. What he didn't know about was Margaret's sealed envelope, still waiting in my safe at home. My wife had always been 3 steps ahead of everyone else, just like she'd taught me to be in the chess games we played on quiet evenings. Sometimes the best moves are the ones you save for last. The stage lights brightened, drawing attention forward again. But in that moment of darkness, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. The perfect, balanced patience of a machinist who knows exactly how to make his next cut. I settled in for the long parade of names, each one echoing through the auditorium like shots from a distant range. You know how time drags when you're waiting for one specific moment? Well, multiply that by about 100 when it's your grandson's graduation. The B names started rolling through. My hands got sweaty on that program, which I'd folded and unfolded so many times it was starting to look like an old maintenance manual. Every few minutes, Ethan would scan the crowd again, his eyes never quite making it to the back corner where they'd stashed me. I lifted that program high every time he looked, like some kind of surrender flag, but the stage lights must have been blinding him. Just like in his younger days when he'd lose his baseball in the sun and I'd have to call out which way to run. Funny how some things don't change. When Bennett Ethan Harold boomed through the speakers, I was on my feet before the dean finished saying his name. Didn't matter that my knees crackled like old bearings, or that Daniel shot me a look that could have stripped paint. I clapped until my palms felt raw and hot, just like they used to after a long day at the lathe. The whole thing wrapped up in a blur of congratulations and class of 23 and whatever else they say at these things. Then everyone started moving at once, like metal shavings drawn to a magnet, flowing toward the reception area in the concourse. I hung back, letting the crowd thin out. No point fighting that current. Through the gaps between bodies, I could see Daniel holding court near a refreshment table. Karen at his side, both of them soaking up praise like they'd earned it. Such dedication, funding his education. All those extra programs you paid for, the sacrifices you must have made. Each comment landed like a hammer blow. I'd lived on bologna sandwiches for years to build Ethan's college fund, spent weekends teaching him how to think through problems instead of just throwing money at them. But there they stood, polishing their halos with other people's work. I found myself drifting toward one of those big concrete pillars, needed something solid to lean against while I got my breathing straight. The pillar felt cool through my jacket, like my old workbench on winter mornings. "Grandpa, I found you." The voice hit me before the hand did, Ethan's palm landing warm and solid on my shoulder. Next thing I knew, I was wrapped in a bear hug that nearly lifted me off my feet. When did that kid get so strong? "I looked everywhere during the ceremony," he said, pulling back but keeping one hand on my arm. "They shouldn't have put you way back there." "Doesn't matter where I sat," I told him, straightening his honor cords. "I saw everything I needed to see." "Mr. Bennett?" A new voice cut in. Dean Whitaker stood there, hand extended. "I wanted to meet the man behind that remarkable essay." His handshake was firm. Not one of those limp fish grabs you get from folks who've never built anything. "Your work shows," he said, looking me straight in the eye. "Not just in the essay, but in him." He nodded toward Ethan. After the dean moved on, Ethan leaned in close. "Grandpa," he whispered, "didn't Grandma leave you something to show today? Something important?" The sealed envelope. It had been sitting in my bedroom safe for 3 years, cooling like an engine powered down and forgotten. Margaret's last chess move, waiting to be played. I looked at Ethan's earnest face, then over at Daniel, still basking in stolen glory. My fingers twitched, remembering the feel of that envelope's edges. Maybe it was time to fire up that old engine one last time. Ethan and I made our way toward the reception hall, his graduation gown swishing like my old shop curtains in a summer breeze. The place was packed tighter than a toolbox, servers weaving through with rattling trays, photo lines snaking around tables like garden hoses. You know how these things go, all sparkle and noise on the surface, but underneath everybody's got an agenda. "Your grandmother," I said, keeping my voice low as we found a quiet spot near the wall. "She left something sealed, an addendum to her will." The word felt strange in my mouth, formal as a funeral suit. "She made me promise not to open it until the right moment." Ethan's eyes lit up like acetylene. "Is this the moment?" Before I could answer, Daniel's voice cut through the chatter like a bandsaw. "Family photo time." He was already herding everyone together, Karen directing traffic with those manicured hands of hers. "You ever watch wolves work? How they circle and press until their target's exactly where they want it. That's how they manage that photo setup. One subtle nudge here, another there. Next thing I knew, I was being slowly squeezed toward the edge of the frame by shoulders and elbows, all wrapped in designer labels and wearing smiles shiny as chrome. "Little tighter together," the photographer called, and somehow that meant I needed to take another half step back. I caught my reflection in a window, just a slice of my weathered face visible between silk blouses and pressed suits. Funny how a man can build a whole family and still end up looking like spare parts. The camera flashed, and the group scattered like metal filings when you lift the magnet. That's when Dean Whitaker drifted by, casual as Sunday coffee. He paused near me and Ethan, adjusting his tie. "Mr. Bennett," he said, voice pitched for privacy, "if you and Ethan need any documentation witnessed tomorrow morning, my office maintains strict neutrality in family matters." He slipped me his card, smooth as passing a poker hand. 9 a.m. if you're interested. I tucked that card in my jacket pocket like a spare key. Something you hope you won't need but feel better having. "Much obliged, Dean Whitaker." Ethan squeezed my arm. "Tonight?" he whispered. "After all this?" I nodded. "Once I'm home, I'll get that envelope. Been waiting long enough." "Dad's coming this way," Ethan warned under his breath. Sure enough, Daniel materialized like he'd been summoned. "Time to get you home, Pop." He gripped my elbow like I was a piece of machinery that might malfunction. "Roads are crazy after these things. We'll drive you." Karen appeared at his other side, both of them bracketing me like safety rails. "We insist," she added, sweet as antifreeze. What could I do? Sometimes you have to let the pressure gauge climb a bit before you can release it properly. "Fine by me," I said, smooth as polished steel. Inside, I was counting minutes, calculating the distance between now and that bedroom safe. They steered me toward the exit, past clusters of chattering parents and the last dregs of punch in crystal bowls. The reception music swelled, something classical that Margaret would have known the name of. I glanced back once. Ethan stood near the dessert table, watching us go. He caught my eye and made a quick gesture, his hand turning an invisible key. "Open it," he mouthed. I gave him the smallest nod. Some messages don't need words, just like some repairs. Don't need manuals. You just know when the time's right to make your move. Daniel's hand was still on my elbow as we approached the doors, but it didn't matter. In a few hours, that envelope would be open, and all his steering and managing wouldn't mean a damn thing. Sometimes the best tools for fixing things aren't in any toolbox. They're sealed in envelopes, waiting for the right moment to turn things true again. Ever notice how some folks can turn hospitality into a trap? There I was, planted at Daniel's dining room table like a decorative centerpiece, while Karen floated around topping off champagne flutes. The crystal ones Margaret had given them as a wedding present. Funny how they only came out when there was showing off to do. "Another splash, Harold?" Karen's voice dripped sweet as maple syrup left too long in the sun. "No thanks." I tapped my watch. "Getting near medication. Time." She just smiled and glided past, zeroing in on Cousin Ruth, who'd just arrived with her husband. "Did you see the ceremony photos? Ethan's success means so much to us." I shifted in that too-soft chair, watching phones light up around the table. Each ping brought another social media alert, another round of proud parents' captions under photos where Daniel and Karen beamed like they'd personally hung the moon. You know that feeling when you've got a speck of metal dust in your eye and every blink just drives it deeper? That's what each notification felt like. Through the window, I watched daylight drain away like oil from a cracked pan. 6:30 stretched to 7, then 7:30. My fingers drummed against my thigh, tapping out the safe combination I'd memorized years ago. 3 right, 2 left. "Really should get home," I said, pushing back from the table. "Blood pressure pills don't wait." Daniel looked up from showing Aunt Martha something on his phone. "Sure, Pop, just let me grab my keys." The drive that should have taken 15 minutes somehow needed 3 detours. First it was, "Oh, we're low on ice," with Daniel swinging into a convenience store lot. Then Karen remembered they needed more balloons for tomorrow's extended family brunch. Each stop felt calculated, precise as a machinist's measurements, but measuring what? I sat in the back seat, watching familiar streets slide by in the growing dark. My house key pressed against my leg through my pocket, solid as a promise. The safe combination played on repeat in my head. Right 25, left 14, right 30. Margaret's birthday, our anniversary, the year we met. Some numbers you never forget, like the tolerances on a precision part. When Daniel finally turned onto my street, I straightened up. Gravel popped under the tires as we rolled into my driveway, the headlights catching the mailbox post I'd set just last spring. Clean work, that. Perfectly plumb, despite what my joints had to say about it. "Need help inside, Pop?" Karen's voice floated back from the passenger seat. "No thanks." I opened the door before the car fully stopped. "Appreciate the ride." I stood in the driveway until their brake lights disappeared around the corner, then turned to my front door. The porch light clicked on automatically. Another job well done, if I do say so myself. My key slid home, smooth as a bearing in its race. Inside, I leaned against the entry table for a moment, listening to the house settle around me. Old houses talk to you if you know how to listen. This one was saying everything was quiet, everything was clear. The grandfather clock in the living room, Margaret's pride and joy, chimed 9:15. Still time. Still plenty of time before midnight to get that envelope, and that's when I heard it. Gravel crunching in the driveway again, followed by the distinct thud of a car door. You know that moment when you're working on an engine and you hear something that's not quite right. That split second when you know you've got trouble coming. Yeah, it was exactly like that. You ever notice how the shortest walks can feel like miles? That's how it was, moving from my entry hall to the bedroom. Each step on that hardwood, boards I'd laid myself back in 72, echoed like shots in an empty factory. The safe sat in my closet behind Margaret's winter coats I still couldn't bear to give away. Funny how clothes can hold a person's shape long after they're gone. My fingers found the dial without needing light, muscle memory taking over. Right 25, left 14, right 30. The mechanism clicked, solid and sure as a well-maintained lathe. Inside, past the deed and insurance papers, sat Margaret's envelope. Thick ivory paper, the kind they used to make wedding invitations from. The seal was still perfect, red wax with the impression of her grandmother's ring, the one Daniel had always assumed he'd inherit. I carried it to the bed, our bed, and sat on Margaret's side. The mattress dipped familiar under my weight, like all those nights she'd pat the space beside her and say, "Harold Bennett, come tell me what's really on your mind." The envelope felt heavier than the steel stock I used to machine, heavier than all the years between then and now. Margaret's handwriting flowed across the front in her teacher's perfect script. Addendum to be opened when your worth is questioned. My eyes burned, vision blurring like I'd forgotten my safety glasses in a shower of metal sparks. Was I really ready to do this? Once that seal broke, there'd be no going back. Daniel would lawyer up faster than a union rep at a contract meeting. Karen would work the phones, spinning whatever story suited them best. The family would split like a cracked casting. And at my age, did I have enough years left to see it through? The envelope started sliding back toward the safe of its own accord. Maybe it was better to let sleeping dogs lie. Maybe. But then I remembered Ethan's arms around me at graduation, strong and sure. Remembered how he'd searched those crowded rows, looking for me. Remembered every Saturday morning in the garage, teaching him the patience of good work, the satisfaction of things done right. "Margaret," I whispered to the quiet room, "guide me." My legs felt steadier as I walked to the kitchen. The fluorescent light hummed to life overhead. I'd replaced that ballast myself last winter. The clock on the stove blinked 8:57. I set the envelope on the table, smooth and white against the old formica, reached into the drawer and pulled out a butter knife, laying it alongside like a surgeon's tool. Know that feeling when you're about to make a critical cut, when everything hinges on getting it exactly right, when you can't afford even 1/1000th of an inch of error. That's what it felt like, sitting there with Margaret's last message waiting under wax. Then I heard it, gravel shifting under tires again. Footsteps on the porch, more than one set. Voices trying to be quiet, but carrying through the screen door anyway. Daniel and Karen, back so soon. The doorknob rattled. Testing, probing. Then 3 sharp knocks, loud as a foreman's time's up signal. I sat there, knife beside envelope, envelope beside empty space, while the clock hummed toward 9, and my children stood outside uninvited in the growing dark. I pushed up from the kitchen table, my joints protesting like old hinges. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. You know that moment when you can feel someone's impatience radiating through a door? That was Daniel, all right. I opened up just enough to see them through the gap, keeping the chain on. Back in my machinist days, I'd learned quick that safety measures exist for a reason. Daniel's face appeared in the narrow space, trying to peer past me. "Just checking on you, Dad. We left Ethan at his graduation party." His voice had that fake concerned tone, like a salesman who's already counted his commission. "I'm turning in," I said, firm as a foreman shutting down third shift. "Long day." Karen shifted behind him, her neck craning like a bird's. Her eyes darted past my shoulder, locked, onto the kitchen table with its bright overhead light. Something in her expression changed. That sharp look she gets when she thinks she's spotted an advantage. I shut the door, before they could say more, threw the deadbolt, and listened to their footsteps retreat. My breath came out slow and heavy in the quiet house. The wall clock ticked, steady as a calibrated gauge. My phone buzzed in my pocket. One of those smartphones Ethan had insisted on teaching me to use. A text from him lit up the screen. "I'm on my way, 10 minutes. Funny how 3 words can steady your hands." I moved to the kitchen, filled the kettle, and set it on the burner. The routine motions helped clear my head. Margaret always said a proper conversation needed tea, even the hard ones, especially the hard ones. I pulled down 3 mugs from the cabinet, Margaret's favorite blue one for me, the MIT one Ethan had. Bought himself freshman year, and that plain white one she'd always set out for difficult guests. Everything had to be just right, calm, documented, decisive, like setting up a complex operation on the shop floor, each step planned, each tool in its place. The envelope seemed to watch me from the table, all that ivory paper and red wax. I slipped it into a plain manila folder, nothing special, just something from my desk drawer. But Lord, it felt like handling blueprints for a classified project. Ethan's knock came right on schedule. 3 quick taps, our old signal from when he'd come by after school. The porch light cast his shadow through the curtains, tall and straight-shouldered. When I opened the door, he stepped in and hugged me tight like he had at graduation. But this time he pulled back quick, eyes going straight to the folder in my hands. "Show me," he said softly. My fingers weren't quite steady as I held up the envelope, angled so he could read Margaret's handwriting. "Addendum to be opened when your worth is questioned." She knew, I said, my voice rougher than I meant it to be. Somehow, she knew this day would come. Ethan squeezed my shoulder, and for a moment, I felt Margaret's touch there too. "Grandpa," he said, "tomorrow morning, the dean's office. Let's open it with a witness." The wall clock read 9:20. I nodded, feeling pieces click into place like a well-designed mechanism. The folder slid neat and quiet into my old leather satchel, the one that had carried 3 decades of technical drawings and work orders. Outside, the porch light clicked off on its timer. In that darkness, I could almost hear Margaret whispering, "Steady now, Harold. Steady as she goes." Ethan and I pulled into the faculty lot at 8:05 the next morning. The campus was quiet except for maintenance crews prepping for the graduate brunch, their carts humming across dewy paths. Made me think of dawn shifts at the machine shop, when the world felt clean and full of purpose. "Ready?" Ethan asked, killing the engine. I patted my satchel. "Been ready since your grandmother handed me this envelope." The administration building stood like an old church, all brick and brass fixtures. Inside, our footsteps echoed on marble floors that had seen 50 years of academic processions. You ever notice how important moments tend to happen in places built to last? Dean Whitaker met us at his office door, already dressed for the brunch in a crisp bow tie. "Mr. Bennett, Ethan, please come in." He gestured to a conference table by the window where morning light drew patterns through leaded glass. I set my satchel down easy, like placing a precision tool on a workbench. The dean closed the door with a soft click and returned with a single sheet of paper. "Simple chain of custody form," he explained, sliding it across the polished wood. "Documents that the envelope was sealed when presented and opened in my presence." My hands weren't shaking anymore as I lifted out Margaret's envelope. Funny how doing what's right steadies you. The ivory paper felt warm, like it had been waiting all these years for just this moment. The wax seal broke clean. Margaret would have appreciated that. She always said how you handle details shows who you are. That familiar scent of old paper drifted up, and suddenly I was back in our bedroom, watching her seal this very envelope. "When the time comes," she'd said, tucking it away, "you'll know when." The addendum was typed. Margaret never did trust her handwriting for important things. 3 paragraphs, each one, clear as machine steel. No lawyer's maze of words, just pure Margaret precision. I read it aloud, my voice growing stronger with each line. Upon my passing, our house and property would transfer directly to Ethan, bypassing Daniel and Linda completely. Until then, I retained full control and living rights. Margaret had even included the property's full legal description, right down to the survey markers. "Smart woman," Dean Whitaker murmured, reaching for his pen. He initialed the witness line, then fed the document through a desktop copier. The machine hummed like a well-oiled lathe. 3 copies slid out. The dean certified each one, his signature flowing across the bottom. "Official copies for your records," he said, passing them over. "The original stays sealed with the university for safekeeping." Relief hit me like sunlight through my old shop window. That moment when you know a complex job's been done right. I touched Margaret's signature, feeling the slight indent in the paper. Even now she was protecting what mattered. Ethan leaned forward. "We should share this at lunch, after the graduate brunch. Most of the family's still in town, better to handle it all at once." I nodded, tucking a copy into my inside jacket pocket. The weight felt good, like carrying a level in your tool belt. Your grandmother would approve. She always said hard truth needs daylight. The campus bell began tolling 9, its deep notes rolling across the quad. 8, 9. Each ring steady as a machinist's count, setting the pace for what came next. I gathered my satchel, nodding thanks to the dean. The morning sun caught his bow tie pin, a small silver square that reminded me of the precision blocks we'd used for calibration. Proper measurements, proper witnesses. Margaret would have appreciated that too. The hotel's banquet room looked like every graduation lunch I'd seen over 40 years of co-workers' kids growing up. White tablecloths fighting with gravity, centerpieces that seemed one bump away from disaster, and air thick with coffee steam and starched napkins. You know that feeling when you're about to change everything? Like that moment before you throw the main breaker on a new electrical system? Ethan caught my eye from across the room and gave me that slight nod we'd perfected in the garage over the years. The one that meant, systems prepped, time to power up. I waited until the waitstaff finished setting down plates of chicken marsala. No sense letting good food go cold. Margaret would have insisted on that much courtesy. Besides, watching Daniel and Karen work the room like politicians at a fundraiser gave me time to steady my hands. They were dropping hints about family property decisions to anyone who'd listen. Once the servers cleared the doorway, I pushed my chair back and stood. The movement rippled through conversations like a pebble in still water. Funny how standing up straight can quiet a room faster than asking for attention. "I want to thank everyone for being here to celebrate Ethan," I began, my voice carrying that shop floor clarity that had served me well for decades. "It means a lot to see family come together like this." My hand went to my jacket pocket, where Margaret's addendum sat like a precision tool waiting for its moment. Years of calibrating sensitive equipment had taught me the value of perfect timing. "Before we finish lunch, there's something Margaret, my late wife, left for exactly this kind of gathering." The envelope came out clean, no fumble. Just one quick tremor when the overhead lights caught her signature, like she was winking at me from the past. The key clause read even clearer than it had in the dean's office. Each word dropped into the quiet room like a metal bearing on a granite surface block, pure and precise. When I got to the part about the house transferring directly to Ethan, Karen's dessert spoon clattered against her water glass. I set the verified copy on the table between them, right between their barely touched plates. The paper settled with that soft sound only important documents seem to make. Daniel's face went through the same phases as metal under stress, first rigid, then flushed with heat, finally showing stress lines around the eyes. This is ridiculous," he sputtered, fingers drumming against his phone. "We'll contest it. Mother wasn't in her right mind. The document's date, witnesses, and chain of custody are all verified," I cut in, calm as discussing tolerances on a blueprint. "Dean Whittaker himself witnessed the opening this morning." Karen's whisper could have stripped paint. "Our lawyers will—" Right on cue, the dean appeared in the doorway, bow tie perfect as a machinist's square. When he nodded, you could almost hear the gears of Daniel's inheritance plans grinding to a halt. I stayed standing, hands relaxed at my sides. Years of precision work teach you that steady hands come from the core, not the fingers. Around the table, polite lunch smiles had hardened into something sharper. Cousin Beth was already typing on her phone, probably updating the family group chat. Uncle Robert, who'd been praising Daniel's financial planning yesterday, suddenly found his napkin fascinating. The room's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees as Daniel fumbled with his phone, fingers shaking worse than mine ever had. Karen's face had gone the color of undercooked dough. You know what's funny about moments like this? They're just like that instant when you fire up a new machine for the first time. All the preparation, all the calibration, it either works perfectly or it doesn't. There's no middle ground. I watched Daniel's screen light up his face as he scrolled, probably through his lawyer's contact list. The sound of his fingernails tapping the glass was like a timer counting down. The drive home felt lighter somehow, like I'd just finished aligning a tricky assembly and everything had clicked into place. You know that satisfaction when all the tolerances finally match up? That's what was humming through me as I pulled into my driveway. My phone had been lighting up since lunch, the kind of attention I usually tried to avoid. But this time, each buzz felt like confirmation that the precision work had paid off. Some messages were kind, others just stunned. Cousin Beth sent 3 exclamation points and nothing else. Uncle Robert typed out a formal apology for misreading the situation. Even my old shop foreman chimed in. "Still hitting your marks, I see." I settled into my chair at the kitchen table, right where that envelope had waited last night. Funny how spaces hold memories. I could almost see the ghost of Margaret's handwriting floating there. The afternoon light was doing that soft thing it does in late spring, turning everything gentle around the edges. That's when Ethan's message came through with a link. "Grandpa, the dean just published this." One click, and there it was in the local paper. A legacy of quiet work. How one grandfather built a scholar. Dean Whittaker's words filled my screen like fresh ink on blueprint paper. The op-ed mentioned my name, right in the first paragraph, linked directly to Ethan's archived essay, and laid out the whole story with academic precision. Every detail was there. The years of garage lessons, the values passed down through careful hands, the way teaching talk specs could somehow build character. Let me tell you something about watching truth take hold. It's like seeing a perfect weld cool. First it sets, then it strengthens, and pretty soon it's stronger than the metal around it. The article started making rounds faster than a parts catalogue in a busy shop. Those proud parents posts from yesterday, they were getting buried under new shares. Proud grandfather this, and real mentor that. Someone even dug up an old photo of me teaching Ethan to change brake pads when he was 12. That one got more likes than Karen's graduation selfies. Daniel tried damage control, posted some stiff note about respecting family decisions and moving forward. But people weren't having it. Every time he or Karen commented anywhere, someone would drop a screenshot of the archive page showing Ethan's essay, the one about his grandfather, the one that was now part of the permanent university record. You want to know the real power of documentation? It's not in the papers themselves. It's in how they make truth stick. Anyone could claim credit for Ethan's success yesterday. Today, the facts had witnesses, signatures, and a dean's editorial backing them up. I stepped out onto the porch as dusk started creeping in. The air had that thick quality it gets before summer really sets in, when you can almost taste tomorrow's heat building. A few early crickets were warming up in the bushes I'd planted with Margaret 20 years ago. Standing there, I felt her presence as clear as a spirit level, bubble-centered, perfect between its lines. She'd known exactly what she was doing with that addendum, knew someday the truth would need more than just my word behind it. That's when I heard footsteps on the concrete, slow and hesitant, stopping right at my front gate. In the gathering darkness, a figure stood perfectly still, probably wondering whether to take those last few steps up the walk. I stayed on my porch, letting the moment hang there, like a heavy casting suspended in mid-air. Sometimes the hardest part of any job is knowing when to let the other person make the next move. The crickets fell quiet as Daniel stood at my gate, looking like a man who'd just watched his precision tools get calibrated out of spec. Karen hung back near their car, her designer purse clutched tight against her chest like armor. Neither one could seem to lift their eyes past my porch steps. You know, that moment in the shop when a part finally shows its fatal flaw, when all the denials and patch jobs can't hide the truth anymore. That's the kind of silence we were standing in. Ethan had come up beside me, shoulder steady against mine. On the little table next to us, Margaret's notarized addendum lay next to Dean Whitaker's folded newspaper article. 2 pieces of documentation as solid as any engineering spec I'd ever worked with. The house isn't a bargaining chip anymore, I said, keeping my voice as level as any measurement I'd ever made. It's Ethan's future now, just like your grandmother intended. Daniel shifted his weight, reminding me of how he used to fidget when I'd catch him trying to skip steps on repair jobs. Dad, we didn't mean— Yes, you did, I cut in, gentle but firm as a properly set brake line. You meant every bit of it. The back row at graduation, taking credit for his achievements. Using this house to keep me in line, you meant it all. Karen tried to meet my eyes but couldn't hold the contact. Her carefully arranged expression was crumbling like poorly mixed epoxy. She'd spent years managing how people saw them. The successful son, the generous daughter-in-law, the devoted parents who funded every step. Now those same people were sharing Dean Whitaker's article, discovering the truth about who really built Ethan's path. I watched Daniel's shoulders cave inward as another notification lit up his phone. Probably another relative sharing that archived essay or adding their own memory of who really taught Ethan his work ethic. The kind of social media storm that doesn't blow over quick, especially in a small town. Your mother knew this day might come, I said. That's why she left such clear instructions. The house stays with me until I'm gone, then goes straight to Ethan. No negotiations, no leverage points, just truth finally getting its due. The fight drained out of Daniel's stance like oil from a cracked pan. He'd lost more than just the house today. He'd lost the story he'd been selling about himself. Karen turned away completely, unable to face the weight of what they'd tried to steal. Not just property, but a grandfather's earned respect. I stepped inside for a moment, my hand finding Ethan's honor cord where it hung over the chair back. The bright gold fabric caught the porch light as I lifted it, running soft as sunrise through my fingers. My calluses caught on the braiding, working hands meeting academic honors, just as it should be. Here, I said, holding it out to Ethan. This belongs with the person who earned it. As Ethan's hand met mine over the tassel, I couldn't help but think how some things are beyond price. A grandson's love, a wife's foresight, the sweet victory of dignity restored. You can't buy those with houses or threats. They have to be earned, one honest day at a time. Standing there with my grandson, watching Daniel and Karen retreat to their car under the weight of consequences they'd earned fair and square, an old machinist's truth came back to me. Respect withheld, is dignity reclaimed twice.